How many of you guys ever heard of the show called Hoarding or Buried Alive? How many of you guys watched it? Hoarding, Buried Alive. It's a crazy show, right? I had a video footage from it that I was going to show tonight, but it was so powerful and so alarming that I thought, yeah, this might steal away from everything we're talking about. So I'm just going to explain it. All right, so the show Hoarding, subtitled Buried Alive, is about individuals who struggle with a mental illness that causes them to store everything. So they can't throw anything away. They don't like throwing anything away. They literally store everything. Unfortunately, this condition that they have causes them to live in some very unhygienic conditions, if you've seen the show, in homes that are literally filled with their own personal junk. I mean, some of these houses are literally just junkyards. I remember I was watching one episode the other day, and the camera guy was following the guy in his house, and I kid you not, it looked like a garbage dump, and it's all his dump. Actually, it was a couple. And the guy took the camera to his coffee machines. And he told the camera, he said, I have 3 coffee machines. And the camera guy's like, the question was like, why do you have 3 coffee machines? He's like, well, because the first 2 got dirty. And they have maggots in them. Now, I'm watching the show and I'm feeling sympathetic towards their mental condition because this is an illness. I'm feeling sympathetic, but I remember screaming at the top of my head, and I didn't say this, but I was thinking it, take out the trash, right? Like just take it out or take out the trash. The problem with this particular guy and with the people struggling with this condition is the fact that they have let the trash accumulate over the years. So much so that it's become unmanageable and unbearable. His mess had become so overwhelming that he wouldn't even know where to start cleaning if he tried to. And I just happened to be watching this show at the same time I was thinking about tonight's message, which I've also aptly titled, Take Out the Trash. We've titled, Take Out the Trash. And here's the thought that came to mind. Let me bring the transition from that show to fighting well tonight in relationships. The thought that came to mind was this. You'll often hear people talk about marriage in terms of, or they'll say things like, that their divorce rate is so high among marriages, and we never know what causes it. But here's what I was thinking about. I thought, rarely do married couples divorce themselves over one issue. Rarely will you find a married couple who got divorced over one issue or one particular event in their marriage. Oftentimes, divorce comes into the picture as a series of unresolved issues that have piled up over the years that either one or both parties have not been willing to deal with, were unable to deal with, or would not face up to. Now, the key word there is this: a series of unresolved issues that have been piling up in a marriage is what results in a divorce. Rarely is it ever because of one thing they did, or really, even if it's one event that broke that caused it, it's oftentimes that one last event that just had been building up on so many other things. Now, you and I know what happens when we don't take care or get rid of the garbage in our homes, right? What happens when you stock up, like all your garbage you have at home, you don't throw it. What happens to your house? Starts to stink, right? Starts to grow, has its own life. Or you end up on a reality show, right? That's what happens, right? But here's what I was thinking about. Have you considered what happens in a relationship or in a marriage when you don't take out the emotional trash or regularly air out your dirty laundry? Did you see that transition? You see, sometimes in a relationship, and especially in a marriage, right? And I know, I've been thinking about this, and I think, I'm speaking to mostly single people. And I know one of the questions that has come up, why are you talking to mostly single people about marriage? Here's why. Because you are going to get married, right? I've been doing young adult ministry for almost a decade now, and I'm yet to meet a young adult person who's called to the life of singlehood. The only person I've met who says they were called to single was single because they hadn't met someone yet. And then they met someone and decided they weren't called to be single anymore. All right, so let's just agree that you're all called to meet someone. Maybe it's not the time yet. And so what I'm doing with this series really, once again, is preparing you for what's coming. Giving you some insight that honestly I wish I had going into my marriage, but I'm obviously having to learn it, and I appreciate that great joy. And so tonight, here's what I want to do. I want to teach you how to take out the trash regularly in your relationships, and not just your future marriage relationships, but even now. I mean, you guys have friends, you have coworkers, you have siblings, you have parents. You got strangers in your life who you interact with regularly. And you will get in conflict at some point. In fact, in tonight's message, really, I'm going to teach us from the Bible how to empty out the inevitable trash that will build up in any marriage or relationship that you have. Now, I know most of you guys are aware of this next point I'm going to make, but let me say it again in case you've forgotten. There's this idea that marriage is the ultimate goal, and marriage is the ultimate happiness, and marriage will it'll be just happily ever after. So here's the reality, because you haven't thought about it. When you get married, listen up, let the chair people deal with it, right? When you get married, you will get in some really bad fights with your spouse. You will get in some really ugly arguments with your spouse. The girl whom you married, who you thought could never say any wrong or do any wrong, will say some things that'll hurt you deeply, guys. And guys or girls, the guy that you married that you thought or that you looked up to as God's gift to you will do something that'll disappoint you. And I think it's important for you and I, or at least you guys who are married, it's important to go into marriage with that understanding that no matter how in love you are, and no matter how special they make you feel, okay, there are going to be some ugly fights. I think you are on a good track if you go with that understanding. And the issue here isn't whether conflict happens or not, right? I can tell you how many couples I've interacted with, whom I've talked with, and they broke up because they got in a fight. I'm like, really? You broke up because of a fight? Like, that's what relationships are about. That's where the substance in your relationship comes from. So the issue isn't whether you fight or not with the person you're dating or the person you're going to marry. Here's the issue. The issue lies in your ability to work through conflict and leverage it as an opportunity to build intimacy and connections. Boy, I will propose to you that if your relationship with the people you have, in fact, here's something good. In case you're dating or you're thinking about dating, if you are dating someone and you're about to get married, please do not get married until you've had a fight, like a really ugly fight where you're just like, I ain't talking to you for the next 2 months, right? Maybe not that bad, right? But you really shouldn't get married until you got into a fight. If you go into marriage without a fight, you're going to go in there thinking they're going to be like that forever. And I guarantee you 2 days after your honeymoon, you'll see who they really are. All right, so get in the fight in a good way. All right, now there are 3 general responses, all right, of how everyone responds to a fight. Every one of you in here responds to conflict in one of these 3 ways, or sometimes you could respond to them with a combination. There are 3 of them, and think about these 3 ideas or these 3 big points as 3 different points on a straight line. The first response of how people respond to conflict is what's known as an escape response. By the way, can I borrow yours, Colleen? When you walked in, you should have received one of these. I always take it from you guys. You should have received one of these sheets. It'll help you follow along. It's just, I tell you what, they tell you that one of the greatest ways to remember a sermon is actually if you write it down. This is just a good principle if you're going to be in school studying. One of the great ways to remember stuff you learn in class, write it down. Go back home, write it down again, and you will remember it most accurately. If you don't have one, please raise your hands. The girls in teal t-shirts or guys will hand you there you go, up front here. Awesome. Okay. All right, so we're talking about, and actually, can I have one? Because my sermon notes, can I have one? Thank you. Appreciate it. All right, so we're going to talk about the 3 different types of responses to conflict. The first kind of response to conflict we're going to talk about really briefly here is what's known as an escape response to conflict. Abs, you need one? You good? He's like, I got He's staring me down. I was like, I don't need one. First one is escape response to conflict. And this happens, here it is, when people are more interested in avoiding a conflict than resolving it. You know, there is this erroneous belief that all conflict is wrong. We're Christians, we love Jesus, we should never have conflict. Rubbish, okay? Conflict is healthy. In fact, some people who have an escape response to conflict, what will often happen is that they will oftentimes deny the difficulty or the reality of the situation. They might run away from it or even pretend it doesn't happen. And so they kind of suffer in silence. The problem with the escape approach to response is that you never deal with the issue that started it. And you know what that means, right? It means you're piling up trash. You're hoarding. And so what happens is that they get offended and they're like, no, I love Jesus. I'm not upset. And they keep piling it up. They don't deal with it. Somebody offends them. They don't address it. Just forget it. Don't worry about it. And they keep piling it up. And inevitably what happens is that you pile up this junk in you. And all it'll take sometimes is for just one extra thing. And what happens is that because you've piled it up so much, when you respond, you end up responding with junk. Volcano. A volcano literally of just garbage. You ever had someone blow up on you and you're like, where did that come from? Yeah, they were piling up junk. Part of it, once again, it's just to help you understand what an escape response is. The worst case scenario, or in the most extreme cases of escape response, people will sometimes harm themselves or even commit suicide as a way of trying to get attention. They haven't dealt with it, and the pain is so great that rather than addressing it, they would take a way out that, in honesty, they just want people to pay attention, but that's an easy, and that's an extreme case. That's an escape response. So that's one end of the line. The other end of the line is what's known as an attack response to conflict. An attack response to conflict. And this happens when people are more interested in winning a conflict than in preserving a relationship. And this response of an attack is most common in people who view conflict as a contest or an opportunity where they can assert their control over other people. And here's how you'll know somebody has an attack response. They will often try to overwhelm you by intimidation. It could be their physical size. It could be through their knowledge. And so anything you say, they know something better. They know all the facts. And they know everything. And if you have a response, well, they've thought it through. And oftentimes it's an attack response, whether it's through physical size, verbal or emotional abuse. Now, just as in the escape response, in the severe cases of people who respond with attack, they will sometimes appeal to authority. Sometimes appeal to authority. Well, the Bible says that you shouldn't do this and you should do this about me, or if you do this, I'm going to report you to the law. Or worst case scenario is murder. All right? Instead of dealing with the conflict, extreme cases, they take it out physically on the other person. Now, you would agree that neither of these responses is what Jesus had in mind when he said, turn the other cheek, right? And it's so fascinating because we always talk about how Jesus has turned the other cheek. You need to understand what he's not literally saying, just pass off on every conflict. There's a context, and we'll talk about that, right? But it's not literally saying don't ever stand up for yourself, don't ever address the issue, don't deny it, don't attack the other person. There's an understanding when Jesus says turns the other cheek. There's wisdom to be applied there, but that's not what we're talking about here. What we really want to talk about tonight is the middle of the line response to conflict, which is what I would describe as a peacemaking response to conflict. Peacemaking response to conflict. P-E-A-C-K-I-N-G. In the book of Revelation, fascinating book, Jesus speaks. Actually, in the book of Revelation and in Matthew chapter 5, verse 9, James chapter 3:18, Jesus, and they're both in your notes there, Jesus talks about being a peacemaker. And in both of those accounts, here's what's fascinating. In both those accounts, Jesus says, if you essentially become a peacemaker, get this, and I love all the passages that have rewards in them. Jesus says, to be a peacemaker, there's some rewards on the other end for being a peacemaker. Matthew 5:9 says, blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called as sons of God. James 3:18 says, peacemakers who sow in peace will raise a harvest of righteousness. So here's the deal. Whether you're married or if you're not married, if you intend to someday ask for a girl's hand in marriage, guys, you intend to someday ask for a girl's hand in marriage, or ladies, you intend to someday give a guy emotional space in your life, here's the deal. You need to learn how to fight. I can just imagine somebody walking in here right when I said that. It's going to sound bad, right? But seriously, you need to learn how to fight. Or let's stick with our theme. You need to learn how to take out the trash. I was planning tonight on getting a bunch of garbage can here, but I was talked out of it, right? You had better learn very early in your life, even now, how to regularly become a peacemaker, how to take out the trash. Practically speaking, here's what it means. It means that when you get in your next conflict, and by the way, it's coming. When you get in your next conflict and things are getting heated and you're about to respond in a not so friendly manner, you want to do something, you want to say this word with me. Just say it with me. Say the word pause. Go ahead. Next time you're in a heated conflict and you're about to blow up, just pause. Seriously, literally pause. And if possible, step away from the situation, breathe a little, and say it with me again. Pause. And when you're pausing, here's what I want you to do. I want you to ask, God, how can I honor you through this conflict? Now, I realize that the nature of a heated conflict is that it's heated and you want to stay in there and you want to dominate. But men, your relationships will have dramatic growth, whether it's with a spouse, whether it's with a wife, whether it's with a girlfriend, boyfriend, coworker, whatever. It'll grow so significantly if you would just pause and just think of yourself, all right, rather than just attack response or escape response, what would it look like if I paused and just asked, how can I please God in this conflict? That'll save your life. It really will. Because what will often happen is that, and by the way, it's funny. Here's what you're not going to hear me say tonight. Turn the other cheek and never argue back. Hell no. I'm not going to say that. I'm going to teach you how to argue well. I'm going to teach you how to fight well, right? Because as a Christian, being a Christian does not mean being passive. That annoys me. That's a pet peeve of mine. Being a Christian doesn't mean you're passive. Doesn't mean you let people walk over you. It does mean that you're a godly person. You honor God first. But it means that you approach conflict with wisdom. There's a way. Anyway, all right. So let me get off my pedestal here or my podium. So let me do this to help us understand how to navigate your way through conflict. I'm actually going to go back to the couple that we met last week. All right. Last week's message we talked about sex, right? I think that was last week. Yeah. Talked about friends with benefits, and in that message we met Mr. and Mrs. Solomon. Well, tonight we are going back to go meet Mr. and Mrs. Solomon. So if you have a Bible, I need you to find the book of Song of Solomon or Song of Songs, all right? Which, by the way, just to admit, I could never find when I open my Bible. And so I even marked it and I lost it. So I'm just going to keep looking. Oh, there you go. I found it. There you go. Song of Songs. It is in there. Some of your Bibles might say Songs of Solomon. Some might say Song of Songs. Same book. All right. And if you recall that story, the story is really, the entire book reads like a poem. It's a beautiful poem about a guy who loves a girl, marries her. And the whole book starts from them dating, right? Going on some great dates, right? Their honeymoon, their wedding day. And last week we were in chapter 4 and 5, and Mr. and Mrs. Solomon had just gotten married. We get to chapter 6 tonight, and man, they had a fight. This is not good. They had a fight. And last week's message, they had just had an amazing wedding day. In fact, we got a sneak peek into their honeymoon bedroom, got a sneak peek at what sex looks like, or as what God intended sex to look like in a marriage. By the time we get to chapter 5 of this book, things are not looking so honeymoon-ish. This couple is in a fight. They had a fight in chapter 5 that basically goes something like this. All right, so all day long, let me give you the backstory. All day long, the newlywed Mr. and Mrs. Solomon, or Mrs. Solomon, had been looking forward to her husband's arrival from work. All right, that's the storyline in chapter 5. Perhaps she even made him a special dinner, prepared a table so they could have a romantic evening together. Except it's 10 p.m. now, and he hasn't shown up, nor has he called her or texted her where he is. At first, she's worried that something might be wrong with him, but as it gets later, her fear starts to turn into anger, and she's upset. So upset that she's giving up on him coming up at a reasonable hour, and she's storming off to bed. That's the story in chapter 5. You want to go read it? Read it. He eventually shows up. Mr. Solomon shows up around 11:45 p.m. after a long day of hard work, right? They have bills to pay. And the only way he knows how to help pay the bills at home is to work late at night. And so Mr. Solomon in chapter 5 gets into the house, and he can immediately tell his wife is upset. You know, he just got married. She doesn't welcome him at the door with a kiss and a hug. All right. He walks in, dinner is covered. Everything is in the living room, right? He gets in, he knocks on her bedroom door because she's locked herself in there. She's upset. He gets in and he starts knocking on her door, but she's too upset to lock. She's too upset to open the door for him because, you know what? If he wants to work out late, then he can sleep out on the couch. That's the fight. Recognizing that his wife is still upset, Solomon tries to win her over, right? In chapter 5, verse 2, he starts speaking sweetly to her. And you can hear that in the chapter. He calls her his dove, his flawless one. Come on, baby, open up. It's me. I love you. And he keeps doing it for a while, but she's not biting. She's not budging. She's still so upset, and she's going to punish him by making him wait a little longer. He's not getting any that night because she's upset at him, right? That's the story. After a while, Solomon starts to get upset because he's like, really? You're going to punish me because I went out to go work late tonight? He gets so mad that Solomon storms out of the house into the pouring rain. I mean, he's incredulous at the thought that she can't even appreciate all the hard work that he's putting into provide for the family. She, in turn, is still at home in her bed, thinking, I'm going to punish him a little longer. But as she lays in bed, she starts to, well, I know he really loves me, right? She's starting to think about it. She's feeling a little alone. Her heart starts to long for her husband. She's craving his affection because despite the argument, she knows he loves her. She's just upset. She just wants him to pay a little. So she gets up, goes back to the door to let her husband in, but he's gone. He stormed out of the house. She looks around the house, can't find him. She looks outdoor in the pouring rain. I don't know where he is. She's starting to panic now. It's late. It's raining. She's almost in tears because she never intended for it to go this far. She can't find him. She goes back to her bed. She cries herself to sleep. Chapter 5 says she has a nightmare where the watchmen of the city basically beat the crap out of her. Excuse my language. Like they mistreat her. They beat her up. That's a dream nightmare she has in chapter 5. The next morning she wakes up, calls her girlfriends over. I'm taking a little bit of creative license with this, so work with me. This is chapter 5, right? Trying to bring us up to chapter 6. Next morning she calls her girlfriends over, admits that she sinned against her husband. She wants to know if any of them have seen him. And that's where we pick up the story in chapter 6. That's good, right? It's so much fun writing that. All right, chapter 6. All right, so here's how chapter 6 starts. And remember what we're doing here. I spent so much time on the story, I think we forgot the point. We're learning how to fight well, right? Chapter 6, verse 1 and 3. Her friends are actually the one, right? Her girlfriends are having tea with her. They're trying to comfort her. Don't worry, he still loves you. He's going to be back. Don't worry about it. Chapter 6, they basically say to her, where has your lover gone, O most beautiful of women? Which way did he turn so that we may go look for him for you? Chapter 6, verse 1. Apparently, after some searching, they find him in verse 2 because she responds by saying, my lover has gone down to his garden, to the bed of spices, to browse in the gardens and to gather lilies. Now, last week when we talked about gardens and we talked about spices, we said last week's message was really gardens was an illustration for sex, right? This week it's not. This week he's literally talking about gardens, okay? So this is not sex, this is gardens, right? Now, it's interesting that she says, my lover has gone down to the gardens. And it's interesting because it indicates that Solomon didn't just storm off into the night into some random unknown location. His wife knew exactly where he stormed off to. At least she eventually found out. Though she panicked initially, it became rather obvious where she could find him. And here's how I know that. When she says, I have found my lover in the garden among the spices, the language she uses there and the word, the garden she describes, is the exact same garden that they were going on dates in chapter 2, verse 16. So Solomon essentially went to what I would describe as his place of solitude. Or here's a better term. He went to his man cave. That's where he goes when he's upset. How many of you guys have maybe it's not a man cave because you probably still live with other people. How many of you guys have a place in your house, your building that you go, that's your spot? How many of you guys have that? All right. It could be the kitchen. It could be the bathroom. It could be the bathtub. All right. Take a bubble bath on a Friday night. Amen. All right. Wherever your man spot is, right? Or lady den, whatever you want to call it, right? That's where Solomon has gone. In this particular case, Solomon went to his man cave or his garden to really get some perspective on the fight with his wife. So here's the point I want to draw out of this. And this is a good time to bring this up. In conflict, when you get married, or even now in relationships, it is vital to the health of your relationship, especially the health of your marriage. It is vital that couples need to learn to give each other space in conflict without ever storming out in a heated conversation or heated discussion. Let me say that again. In conflict, it is healthy and vital that couples give each other space without storming out on a heated discussion. So here's the reality. Anyone who's married will tell you this. There will be moments in your marriage, though you live together, there will be moments in your marriage where you'll just need to get the hell out the house. Wow, I am on a roll with my language tonight. Forgive me. All right. There will be moments when you will need to just get out the house, right? Because it's just you can't stay, you can't bear it anymore. There will be moments when you'll need to get away from each other. But here's the deal. Here's the key to storming out. You should always, if you need to walk out on a conflict, you should always do it in such a respectful manner, get this, that leaves room open for peaceful reentry. Did it make sense? Let me say that again. If you want to storm out because you're upset, conflict is getting too heated, fine. But here's the deal. Do it in a respectful manner that allows you room for peaceful reentry. So here's what that means. It means that when you're having a conflict with a spouse or with someone whom you love dearly, it's fine to get some space between both of you. But on your way out, don't break things. Don't slam things. Don't leave lingering comments or insults or threats on your way out. Are you with me on that? Right? Because sometimes you just need to get some space. And that's fine. If at all possible, if you need to walk out on a conflict, verbally express to the other person where you're going, right? And here's why I was thinking about tonight, and I thought, here's why that's important. Because the other person, if they genuinely love you, if you storm out, they're probably panicking, thinking you've driven into some ditch, someplace. So if you're going to storm out, you know what, I got to get out of here, I'll be in the basement. You know, let them know where you're going. Don't leave lingering threats or insults, right? Because why would we do that? We do that to when you just, right? You want to leave a little bit of jab. Don't do that. That's not healthy. That doesn't leave room for peaceful reentry. Because you walk back, if you leave that and you go back, you're coming back to war. And I tell you what, sometimes those few hours or minutes or however long apart are all it takes for the Holy Spirit to work on the heart of the other person. See, that's not escape, nor is it attack. Because the goal is to re-enter, right? But re-enter with peace. Now, no marriage is perfect. But here's the deal. If you ever have to storm out or walk out on a conflict, you need to re-engage within 24 hours. 24 hours, whether it's a marriage or just a friendship. Re-engage within 24 hours. And here's why it's important. Anything beyond 24 hours, two things can happen. Number one, you forget why it happened. And so when you come back after 24 hours, you're like, well, you said my mother was a goat, you know, and she's like, what? I never said that. Like, you know, right? Because details get blurred. You're still, right? Too long has gone by. Or here's the worst part. Satan might take that time apart and start to really wind some things up. Satan could leverage any longer in fact, 24 hours is a long time, but any longer than that, Satan might really leverage that to really build up the conflict into something that it never was. Are you with me? Write that down if you need to. Re-engage within 24 hours. Okay, so you walk out, you need to get some space, some perspective. You're in your man cave or your lady den or whatever it is, right? What is it you're doing? Remember, you're not there plotting your comeback, right? You're not there like writing up your attack that's not what you're doing there. You're there to do what? Say the word with me again. You forgotten the word? Say it with me again. You got to pause, right? That's what you're doing in your man cave or your lady den. You're pausing and you're asking the question, how can I be a peacemaker here? How can I honor God in this conflict? If it's with your spouse, you win a lover. If it's a coworker or a friend, man, you just demonstrated godliness. Either way, it's a win-win. You pause. And when you are in your private space, as Solomon was, there are a number of things God can do. Three things I would propose. Number one is this. God might very well call you to just simply overlook a conflict. Right? God might sometimes call you to overlook an offense. That's the next point, by the way. Well, I tell you, I've known enough couples, and I've been married, obviously, and I've interacted with enough couples to know that sometimes some conflict have nothing to do with anything. Those are guys who are married. You ever had a dumb fight with your wife? Just not about nothing. Like, you're just kind of going at each other, and there's no really anything there. It's probably one of you is tired, or just, you know, you haven't argued in a while, and it just seems like that's what's next, right? So sometimes, and you know what, that's not only true in marriage, that's true in relationships. There are sometimes you're arguing with someone, and in the back of your mind, you're thinking, why are we arguing? This makes no sense. And so sometimes God might call you to just simply overlook an offense. In fact, Proverbs chapter 19, verse 11 says, a man's wisdom gives him patience. And it is to, get this, I love this, it is to his glory to overlook an offense. That's powerful. Proverbs 17:14 says, starting a quarrel is like breaching a dam, so drop the matter before the dispute breaks out. Right? There's just wisdom sometimes in just, you know, there's just certain things, you know, some things you just need to let go of. It's nothing. That's one response. Another response, however, might be more direct. Another response from taking a break might be God might very well call you to go to the other person and get this. God might call you to help you, or God might call you to go to the other person and gently help them see how they contributed to the conflict by sticking with the facts. Wow, that's a tough one. God might sometimes, all right, so you have a conflict with somebody close to you. How do you resolve it? Sometimes if God says overlook it, other times God might say go to them and gently, respectfully show them how they contributed to the conflict by sticking with the facts. Now, here's the key. There's a way to confront someone without confronting them. There's a way to bring somebody, and here's how you do it. I think oftentimes when we have a conflict and we're arguing, what you got to be careful. If Andrew and I had a conflict and he did some things to me that I got upset at, and he meant well, but I go up to Andrew and I say, Andrew, why did you come in? Or did you take my Bible off here and put it over there? Now, I just came to Andrew. Okay, so Andrew offended me. Andrew, would you come on up? Let me illustrate this. I don't know if I need you up here, but it's just fun. It'll be fun. So I have my Bible here. I'm getting ready, and Andrew takes my Bible. He takes my Bible, and he moves it over there. Threw my Bible on the floor. How dare he throw my Bible on the floor? And so, all right, so I come to Andrew. There's a way to confront Andrew, and so let me walk. No, you can put it back down. I need to illustrate this. Okay, so I come to Andrew, and I say, Andrew, my Bible's on here, and you picked it up, and you threw it to the floor. Now, here's the wrong thing to do with Andrew. Hey, Andrew, I know you don't like my style of preaching. I know you have a problem because I think I go too long, but that's no reason for you to come take my Bible off my podium, right? What did I do? I judged his motives. When the Bible says do not judge others, that's what it's talking about. The Bible isn't saying don't judge him for that. You took my Bible and removed it. I could judge him for that. That's an action, and I could stick with that. What I shouldn't do is judging his motives. He very well could have taken that because he needed a Bible because he didn't bring his. Thank you. You can go back. Awesome. You can get my Bible back too. Right? Right? There's a difference. When you confront someone, you don't go to them and judge them for why you think they did what they did. Stick with the facts. Hey, the reason I'm upset is because you took this and you did that. And that can be powerful. Sticking with the facts. Now, we're human, and we know that rarely will they respond by saying, oh, thank you for pointing out what I did wrong, right? But you know what? I think the responsibility is on you to do the godly thing. But and I think that's where Christians often cross the line. We cross the line when we judge why we think other people did certain things to us. That's what Jesus says, don't judge. You got to judge actions, right? Because it's just they did an action. What you don't judge is why you think they did it. Stick with the facts and the actions of the words that created the conflicts. Don't accuse them for why you think they did what they did. In fact, Matthew chapter 18, verse 15, get this. Jesus says, if your brother sins against you, he says, go and show him his fault. Just between the two of you. And if he listens to you, you've won yourself a brother, right? And I think what we'll often do is that somebody offends us. Renee offends me. And instead of me dealing with Renee, I'm going to go tell Lindsay and Colleen, did you believe what Renee said to me about my mama and why she's, right? So I talk to Lindsay about what Renee did. And I also tell Lindsay and Colleen why I think Renee did what I did. And so I've just blown it out of proportion. Man, I'm having fun with that, right? You are. I am having fun with that one, right? Show them what, and then there's a third response. God might, while you're in your man cave or lady den and you're pausing, God might, and you ask God, how can I honor you? God might call you to overlook it. God might call you to gently show them their fault. Number 3, God might call you to go to the other person and get this, admit your fault by taking responsibility for your part in the conflict, your contribution to the conflict. And this is probably a tougher one to do. A lot of us, some of us can overlook a conflict. Others are good at pointing other people's faults out, but some of us struggle with admitting our role in it. And by the way, let me give you a very practical way to apologize. This is really good. When you apologize, you probably want to stick with I statements, statements that have I, and avoid statements that have you in them. So let me illustrate what I mean. If Andrew offended me, I'm just picking on you today. I should not go to Andrew and say something. Let me not use Andrew because this is mean. Let me use somebody random. Okay. All right. When you're apologizing, you shouldn't say things like this. I am so sorry that you are such an idiot and you can't get my apology. Right? Or I am so sorry that your pea-sized brain is unable to perceive the godliness in me, right? So stick with I statements. I apologize for what I did to you. Okay, so I did use you in there, but you get the point, right? Right? You want to, right? When you apologize, you're taking ownership. You don't go into an apology to defend your cause. If it's a genuine apology, you're not defending your cause. Hopefully you've sat and you've thought through what you did, focused on what you did in the argument, what you did or said that might inflame the situation. Most of all, you're apologizing for your part in it, and you're asking for forgiveness without bringing up what they did. I need you to forgive me because I was wrong for what I said and did. And you don't add onto it because of what you said, right? You don't do that. Mr. and Mrs. Solomon illustrate for us through their conflict in a marriage how to respond with peacemaking skills, right? She's looking for him. She finds out she's in his garden. Apparently a few hours have passed, and that's really all they needed to resolve their conflict, because verse 3 of Song of Songs chapter 3, when she finds him in his garden, the place of solitude, his man cave, instead of recounting the details from the night before when she denied him sex, listen to what she says in verse 3 of the book of Song of Solomon chapter 6. She says to her husband, this is her apology, I am my lover's and my lover is mine, and he browses among the lilies. Now that's lingo for apology, but in place of a blanket apology, she essentially apologizes to him with terminology from the events that happened the night before. So in chapter 5, Solomon comes to her. He really wants to sleep with his wife. He wants to have sex with his wife, but he's like, you've been out too late. I don't want to even sleep. I don't want to see your face, right? And so she essentially comes back to him. And when she says, I am my lover's and my lover is mine, here's what she's saying. She's saying, I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the way I treated you last night. I belong to you. Every part of my body belongs to you. I committed to marry you in love and health, death and living. I apologize for not following through on my marriage commitment. And you know what? That's the perfect apology. Now, of course, that's between a husband and wife. Don't go apologizing like that to a random stranger, right? Your body does not belong to a stranger, right? This is husband and wife, right? But I think this is the perfect apology because she doesn't make an excuse for what happened. She acknowledges her failure and appeals to her commitment or their commitment to God. And so here's another practical application for resolving conflict. When I sin, I initiate reconciliation. You with me on that? When I offend the other person, I initiate reconciliation. Romans chapter 12, verse 18 says, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. You know what's funny about that passage? We often quote the latter end of it, live at peace with everyone. But the emphasis is as far as it depends on you. Here's what that means. It means that when you are in a conflict with somebody else, Christian or non-Christian, regardless of who started the conflict, you as a follower of Jesus Christ are obligated to initiate reconciliation. Did you hear that? Because that's hard. Like it's saying, even if they are completely 100% at fault, as a follower of Jesus Christ, the Lord God of heaven says, as long as it depends on you, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. You need to make things work for godliness, and especially in marriage, right? And I love this question, whenever a couple's having an argument and who should initiate reconciliation? And I love what the author of Love and Respect said about that. He said, well, if there's a conflict between a couple and they can't agree on who's at fault, who should initiate reconciliation? He says, well, the more mature one. Which is funny because you're like, I'm more mature, right? Anyway, moving on. All right, so, and that's what Mrs. Solomon did, right? She initiated reconciliation with her husband. Now, so that's how to approach conflict. I take a moment, pause, work on all of that. Now, the question is, what about you if you're the one being apologized to? If you're the one being apologized to, how do you respond to that? Someone has offended you, or perhaps you've offended someone, and as a godly act, they come to initiate reconciliation. Solomon could have said to his wife, okay, babe, I forgive you, but don't ever do it. Don't do that next time, right? Which, man, that is probably the worst thing you could do because that undermines anyone's apology. Someone comes to you and apologizes and say, well, don't do it next time. Really? Did you have to put that in? It means you're not really done with it. Instead, look how he responds to his wife in verse 4, the wife of his youth. She comes to him, says, I'm my lover is mine. He says to her, you are beautiful, my darling, as Tirzah, lovely as Jerusalem. majestic as troops with banners. Turn your eyes from me, they overwhelm me. And this is funny because you could tell this couple just got married, because if you've been married for a few years, conflict usually doesn't, I don't offend my wife, and my wife's like, honey, you are as beautiful as Africa. And she's like, you need to get away from me, right? But as soon as Solomon hears her voice, he says, basically when he says you're as beautiful as Tirzah, Tirzah is a vacation spot in ancient Israel. He's saying, man, I don't even remember what we were fighting. He wholeheartedly accepts her apology. In fact, I'm sorry, the word Tirzah means you are my delight. It's a beautiful word for an oasis city in Palestine. And he's saying just the very fact that you came back, man, that's just joy in my heart. Her gentle and humble spirit reminded Solomon of his vacation days with her, which really gives a perspective on passages like Proverbs 25:24, where it says, better to live on the corner of a roof than share a house with a quarrelsome wife, or a husband for that matter. Whoever finds a good wife finds a good thing. Whoever finds a good husband finds a great thing. If you are on the receiving end of an apology, there are a few things you can do. Number one, when somebody apologizes to you, you verbally acknowledge the apology. And I thought this was fascinating, right? Because guys and girls are different. The way guys interact in conflict and post-conflict is very different. I've had a number of fights, not big fights, but arguments with my close male friends. And if me and my friend fight, we don't need a lot of reconciliation. I kid you not, like I got friends where we've, Lester, one of my best buds, we've had some intense arguments before. And I remember one particular argument about, we had done an outreach, and I basically, instead of, he wanted me to focus in on one area of the outreach, and I wanted to oversee everything, right? I just work better managing people. And we got upset, and that night we got to the apartment, we talked about it, and literally we resolved our conflict over some hot wings, some Mountain Dew, and Eli Manning scoring some touchdowns. I mean, it was just, I don't even think we said, I'm sorry. And we were done. I discovered pretty quickly that doesn't work the same thing with women, right? You need to talk, right? And so Solomon, when he's talking think about it, this is Solomon's wife, the wife of his youth. When it came time to reconcile their conflict, Solomon verbally let his wife know that things are okay between both of them. So this is the person receiving an apology. You need to acknowledge the apology. Receive it. Solomon says to her, turn your eyes from me, verse 5. They overwhelm me, and then he starts blessing her. He says, your hair is like a flock of goats. We explain that that's a blessing. We explain that that's a compliment. He says, your teeth are like a flock of sheep. He's saying you're awesome, you're beautiful. That's all he's saying, right? And so if you're being apologized, acknowledge it. Thank them for it. And take it a step further. Don't just accept the apology. Verbally reaffirm your commitment to the relationship. If you're married, verbally reaffirm your commitment to your marriage. And that's so important, right? I talked about this earlier, but here's the deal. I really mean this. You need to learn how to fight clean. Every marriage has conflict. Every marriage has fights. The key is to learn how to fight clean. And fighting clean means that when you argue, the words you use, right, as much as possible, stick with the facts. Don't, like we illustrated with Andrew, don't attack the motives or why you think the other person did it. Stick with what you do know, right? Not why you think they did it. And also, you got to be careful. When to fight clean means you don't bring up old things. Well, you did this again because you've always done it. Right? Fighting clean means you stick with the facts. And that could really be healthy for your marriage. If you keep bringing up older things, or you refer to their mothers or parents, right? You don't want to go those places. Every relationship has conflict. But there shouldn't be any threats about divorces, right? I knew a couple who said every time they got in a fight, the husband always threatened to leave her. Men, if you want to kill intimacy in your marriage, do that. Which probably was what he was doing. He was probably going to divorce her anyway, so he just kept threatening. He eventually did. Do not threaten each other in marriage. In fact, in affirming his love for her, or reaffirming his commitment to her, in verse 8, Solomon says, I love this. He says to her after the apology, he says, 60 queens there may be, and 80 concubines, 80 young hot women, is basically what he's saying, and virgins beyond number. He says, but my dove, my perfect one, is unique. Solomon is essentially saying, hey, listen, babe, I'm still in this 100%. You're the only one for me. I don't care and get this, Solomon is a king. He's saying, I don't care. The most beautiful women come to me. You are my one and only, which is ironic because Solomon ended up marrying 700 wives. But this is early on in his life, right? This is early on in his life before he really made that. And those 700 wives, a lot of it with business deals, but that's another message. It really is another message. Solomon reaffirms his commitment to her. Now, when that happens, let's finish off with this. Here are the results of what happens in a relationship or in a marriage when a couple learn to fight clean. As their fight draws to a close in verse 9 and 10, note what her husband's affirming love and forgiveness has done to her self-image and public image. Now, these are her friends speaking in verse 9 and 10. They say this. They say, the maidens saw her. In other words, her friends, her girlfriends saw her and called her blessed. They called her blessed. The queens and the concubines praised her. And listen to what they're saying to her. They're like, whoa, who is this that appears like the dawn, fair as the moon, bright as the sun, majestic as the stars? In other words, they're like, oh, where you been, girl? Look at you looking all fine. Look at your hair, girl. Look at you smiling, right? That's basically what they're doing. Now, that's an interesting response because what were they doing early on at the beginning of this chapter? They were crying with her, right? Don't worry, he still loves you. It's okay, he ain't gone, baby. I feel like an old black woman from the 70s. Like, that's how like a grandma would talk, right? Like they were comforting her, they're crying with her, they're giving her tissue. It's okay, baby, I'm gonna make some more tea, right? And now they see her after being, get this, that's the power of this reconciliation. Her husband and her have just gone to a new, deeper level. Yeah, big mama, right? Right? They felt so sorry for her at the beginning. They were about to throw a search party for her. But when they see her now, they're about to throw her another bridal shower because she looks so radiant. Her husband's love has reaffirmed her sense of public image. Man, but I tell you this, guys, this is so important. The way you treat your wife will reflect the way she perceives herself as a woman. Even in public, the way she carries herself in public will oftentimes reflect how you treat her in your home, how you care for her. If she knows that and I'm not even talking about like, being wealthy. Forget that. I've known poor couples, man, who just, I know a guy who's, I think he might be like 71 and his wife is like maybe 68. And he used to be my mechanic. He still calls his wife babe. I went to go get my car fixed the other day, and he's talking to her, and I kid you, I thought he was cheating on his wife. Because he's like, hey, sweetie pie. Oh, and they were talking about a movie, and I remember thinking, who the heck are you talking to? And it was his wife. And she came in, and I thought, wow, like 70-year-old dude and his wife, and her wife came in, and she was teasing, and I just thought, she was walking like that. That's how I wasn't just dancing. That's, she was teasing, and I thought, man, Lord, would you grant that in my wife and I are 102. I don't know if we're going to live that long, but she's like, no, right? My wife are like old and we're still calling each other babe, sweetie pie, sugar, chocolate. Did you say chocolate? Sweet chocolate, sexy chocolate, right? She calls me sexy chocolate. I got some good love. All right, I'll leave that alone. Right? This girl is called blessed. Think about what her friends do. She's called blessed. She's compared to the moon. She's compared to the sun. Her husband still likes her. You guys can't let the chocolate go, can you? Let it go. Come on. So here's the deal. Remember what I said at the beginning of this message. In dating and marriage, the issue isn't whether you fight or not. In relationship, it's not whether you fight or not. The issue is you need to learn how to fight clean. Your ability to work through conflict will build intimacy. I gotta tell you, I've had some arguments with my wife on occasion, and by God's grace, I don't even say this to put our marriage on the spot, but I married a good wife. I don't tell her that. I really did marry a good wife. I was thinking about that lately. I just thought, man, that God really blessed me. And here's why I married a good wife. Aside the fact that I think she's hot, my wife and I have learned how to fight well. I grew up, my parents, tell you a little about my family. My mom and dad, it's funny, my wife and I come from different families. My parents, I meant different types of family. Yes, that is good. We come from different families. I'm on a roll. This is the sign that I should finish my message, right? Chris and I should finish up really soon. Okay, 5 minutes. Give me 5 minutes. I'll be done. My mom and dad, my father's gone home to be with the Lord, but my parents, fought so bad that at one point my brother and I sat my mom down, and this was way before I really understood marriage and God's desire for marriage. My brother and I sat with my mom and told her to get a divorce. That was how bad it was. My parents fought dirty. Oh man, I mean, they were physical shoving, but just some things when they would upset, their fighting was never about the issue. It was always just that extra. And I heard some things in my family. I just remember thinking, my goodness. And it's no wonder they never, there wasn't any intimacy there. And by God's grace, I was talking about my wife. I married a wife who really comes from a healthy family, and my wife and I have learned how to fight well. Please, I don't even pretend to say because I'm a pastor, we argue. Right? And there have been some, and here's what I know, 95% of it is usually my fault. I was thinking about it, I'm like, God, I really do cause a lot of trouble in this house, right? But we've learned how to fight clean so that when we argue, we're really good at, if we need to take space, we take space. And then oftentimes we'll come back and we're good at sticking with the issues, and I really appreciate that about them. Here's what I'm getting at. Guys, find a good wife. Girls, find a good man. Find a good man. And she loves me more, and I love her more not because we've never had a fight, but because even in our toughest discussions, our toughest arguments, we have learned how to come together and talk about it, and that's not easy. I got to tell you, we've had some nights of tears. There have been some nights where she's gone to bed crying, and I'm in the living room fuming, and we woke up in the morning, and the first thing we did was discuss it. There have been some times, maybe once, that I think I got so upset that I just kind of walked out of the house. Then I came back and I explained where I was. There have been some times where she didn't want to talk to me, or a day. Actually, it's never gone a day, but right, so I'm just being real. We've had some conflicts. Some of it has been her fault. Most of it has been mine. But there will be conflicts. Don't ignore it. Don't always attack. But learn to fight clean by putting into practice these things that we talked about. You will experience a deepening of your relationship because it'll build intimacy in your marriage. It can be a powerful experience if handled in a godly manner. My greatest joy, I got to be honest with you, as a young adult pastor, one of my greatest joys is marrying you guys off, sending you home or wherever it is you're going to go. That gives me a lot of joy. But it gives me greater joy when you do it well. I got to be honest with you. It really does. It gives me joy when I see you doing it well, when you've spent time just working through your relationship. I pray for you guys. I pray that God would lead you into godly relationships. But man, this is one you got to learn. We're ending the series now. And I'm glad that we ended on this note, because had I ended with last week's message, the series, you would have thought, man, sex, that's awesome. Marriage is going to be all sex, right? No, but there's this part of it. There's conflict. And you got to learn how to fight well. And realize that you can leverage conflict in your marriage to build intimacy in your marriage. Amen?